Hello, welcome to another Happy Histories of London with Michael and Christian, my cameraman there. Today I've brought you to the River Thames and we're in the city of Westminster, and I'm going to tell you a story. Now, this is histories, but I'm going to tell you a kind of a religious stroke mythical story. And we are 21st century people, we've got very logical brains, but what we need to do for stories like this is put our logical brains to one side and engage our hearts and our imaginations to really appreciate this story. We can pick up our intellect afterwards. That's the only way I can actually say it. Anyway, the story goes that in the Dark Ages, when between the time that the Romans left England and the Normans arrived here, there was a fisherman called Edric fishing in the middle of the River Thames here, very unsuccessfully, and it was a Sunday. And he saw over there, and actually if you can see just over there, that is where the Palace of Westminster is. The Palace of Lambeth Palace. And this is where the Archbishop of Canterbury keeps his toothbrush when he's in England. When he is in London. Anyway, he was standing over there and he hailed the fisherman, and he rowed over to him and he asked if he could go over to the other side. So the fisherman said yes, and he was rowing over and complaining about the bad fishing, hoping he'd get a good tip. Anyway, the gentleman arrived over here and there was a church that had newly been built, and he said, look, I want to go in there and offer up my devotions. Will you wait for me? He said, yes, no problem. So this gentleman went in, and lo and behold, when he went in, angels started singing, heavenly lights went through the windows, and the poor fisherman was in a state of shock, really. But when the gentleman in very un-English garb came out, he got into the boat to go over to the other side, and the poor fisherman was kind of in a state of shock. So the gentleman said to him, tried to put him at ease. He said, look, before I started my second career, I used to be a fisherman myself. And I reckon, even though it's a Sunday and we shouldn't really be fishing, I reckon if you throw your nets over now, you will be a very happy man. So he threw his nets over and the boat was swamped with fish. Anyway, he got to the other side and he said, thank you very much. You've got your fish and I've done my devotions. And I want you to give a message to the Bishop of London and the King of England. When they come, they're going to come and consecrate the church. But tell them don't bother, because I've done it already, because I am none other than St. Peter himself. And Westminster Abbey is in fact dedicated to St. Peter. And he gave him a fish and he said, give them this fish as a kind of a token of my appreciation. And to this day, the Fishmongers Guild of London, once a year, the Dean of the Abbey holds a dinner. And there is no food on the table at all until there's a knock on the door, and the door is answered, and the person at the door says, there's a gentleman here with food who wants to come in. And they bring in the fish and they have a fish supper. So this is a kind of an unknown story, and I really get a big kick out of it. But that's only part one. I'm going to give you part two in a minute. Myself and Christian are now going to walk over to the Abbey itself, and I'll give you part two. Okay, let's go. I'll tell you what, here's an interesting thing. See that building there, just to the left? That was the headquarters of the British Fascist Society.
No.
It was, Mosley's headquarters.
Really?
Yeah, just there. So here we are at the entrance to Westminster Abbey. This is the in English history, the history of our monarchy and in our politics and our literature. This is the quintessential building. And the story about how it came out, I've told you part one, and here is part two. In 1003, Prince Edward was born, and he died in 1066. 1966 and 1066 are dates that all English people know. But let me tell you a little bit about his story. As a youth, he was over here, but we were being invaded by Vikings and Danes and so on, and he fled to Normandy, and he stayed there until he was 40 years of age. And when he was there, he knew that the throne of England was rightfully his, and he prayed fervently to God, and he promised him, he said, if I get my throne, I promise you a pilgrimage to Rome to visit the bones of St. Peter. And then his prayers were answered, and he was crowned at about the age of 40 years of age. But he wasn't able to fulfill his vow because, if he left, somebody else would try to kind of usurp his throne. So he told the Pope of his dilemma, and the Pope said to him, if you build a place of worship here, if you rebuild the abbey that was here, there was a Benedictine abbey, your vow will be annulled, and that the building of this abbey will be a replacement for your pilgrimage. So he built this magnificent abbey. Part one, it was subsequently knocked down and rebuilt, and there are all sorts of additions. It's a little bit like a Lego house with bits built by various monarchs and so on. Edward was very devout, and he was our only king to be canonized, to become Edward the Confessor. Confessor because he was a saint who didn't suffer martyrdom. He was also celibate. He made a vow of chastity, but when he became king, marriage was on the line, and he married Edith to knit families together and to make the monarchy stronger. Incidentally, he is actually the patron saint of unhappy, troubled marriages. So I don't think celibacy in marriage is really a good idea. What else can I tell you about him? Yeah, of course he was known for his piety, and he only went to war once, and he fought in Scotland to help Malcolm, King Malcolm, fight against Macbeth, and consequently Shakespeare made the famous play about this. And there's another story. He was renowned for his piety and his saintliness, and at one point he was visiting a church in Essex, the Church of St. John the Evangelist. He met a beggar there. The beggar entreated, asked him for money, but he didn't have any money, so he gave him his ring, and he thought nothing more of it. But years later, two English pilgrims were in the Holy Land itself, and they met an elderly man, and the elderly man said, look, I can see you guys are Englishmen, and what I want you to do is give this ring back to the king and tell him that this ring has come from none other than St. John the Evangelist, and tell him I will meet him in 6 months in heaven. So they went back, they returned the ring, and in 1066 the king died. And he's laid to rest here. And he was canonized because people went to his shrine and they were cured of all sorts of diseases. And there was a tradition whereby people believed if they touched the hem of the king's coat, they would be cured. And this tradition kept on going until the time of Queen Anne. But anyway, this is a magnificent cathedral. It costs £30 to go in, which is a bit steep. But if you ask them over there, say I want to, like St. Peter, I want to go in and offer, say a prayer, they will let you in for free. But there's a couple of things I have to tell you. that I love features, modern features. The statues here are of modern day saints. So Martin Luther King is up there. Bonhoeffer, the German Catholic clergyman who opposed Hitler, his statue is there. And just over here, not connected to the Abbey at all, but I find it very interesting, this was the headquarters of the British fascist societies, and Oswald Mosley would address people here. So there you have it there. Thank God we don't have that anymore. But it's well worth a visit, and it's a bit of English history that is worth bringing back. We need to kind of celebrate these things. Anyway, thank you for watching, and keep an eye out for some more of our videos.